Well, happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday.
I hope things are going well for you.
Things are going well.
Good.
Yes.
Good.
Absolutely.
I'm wearing some of my new Community Lutheran Church
Yeah, I saw that today.
uniform wear.
Yeah.
Spirit wear or something, So I got some vests for fall.
Nice.
Yeah. I thought
Yes. It's nice vest weather, isn't it?
it is. It's only in the 60s today. If you're joining us from somewhere else,
Yes.
this is the beginning of our winter weather.
Indeed.
Yep.
For those of you tuning in from the northern hemisphere.
Yes, this is winter gear here.
Yes.
I think that I've only had to wear a winter coat, an actual winter coat, maybe twice. One of
too
them
frequent, right?
was when we were still in the pandemic, and we were doing Sunday morning parking lot services.
Yes.
And we had not every week, but we had a couple of Sundays where it was pretty chilly.
Yeah, overall, I mean, it was pretty beautiful.
It was really good weather.
Like it was really, really nice.
Yeah.
Philip's fingers, I could understand that.
Getting
like if
cold.
when you're playing the piano like that.
Right.
I can understand that one. But otherwise, there's never a question like we were going to have to cancel or anything like that.
Never.
A couple clouds went over that had us looking up.
Like, is it going to rain on us?
But overall, that was a really...
And there was always was it like 8:45, the helicopters going to the Grand Canyon would fly directly overhead.
Directly overhead.
And it was always just about 9 o'clock when the pigeons would rouse from the rooftops, almost
Yes.
like clockwork.
Mm-hmm.
You remember that? Like
do.
helicopters and pigeons. That was our only...
Pigeons.
Yeah, but we had a really busy, in terms of positive, busy Sunday and Saturday this past weekend. And if you didn't get to join us, some of the hubbub of activity was the fact that we were finishing up making and creating tiles for our...
That was a big deal.
Yeah.
That turned out to be a much greater success rate than I think we originally thought. Yeah.
And so we had to have a makeup date and for folks because we ran out of tiles. And so out on our really our patio or courtyard moving out towards Community Lane versus our own parking lot, we already have a 25th anniversary mural of tiles that people did. Well, we're going to add to that for our 50th, and we finished that off this weekend. A lot of people painting. And then we had our women's ministry do a bake sale, and they had two different places in the church that they were selling cookies and other things, and so that was going on. We also had Angel Tree, which is picking up little ornaments that have a child's name on it and what they would like for Christmas, because Angel Tree is that program that helps children have Christmas whose parents are incarcerated. So obviously finances are a thing, and in some ways, their children are victims of an absentee parent because of a crime they committed. So that they get caught up in that too, and so we do that, and then we were also handing out and selling our 50th anniversary cookbooks.
The cookbooks are out.
The cookbooks are out. So if you haven't heard, we this past year, a number of our faithful members, including two council members, three council members, Jenny Chapman and Carol Fry and Ann Grisham, said, let's do a 50th anniversary cookbook. And Ann and Carol and Jenny, in different ways, did some things. They enlisted a lot of people and then solicited all of us, meaning the congregation, to submit recipes. We pulled some recipes from older cookbooks of some charter members. Those are in there. We have memories from various staff members from over the years, including our founding pastor, Pastor Ray, and our previous senior pastor, Dr. Mark, and some other staff folks. So there's some memories in there. There's some recipes from old, new ones. Some children submitted some recipes. So we have this wonderful cookbook for our 50th anniversary. And some folks pre-ordered them and paid, and they picked them up. But we also had more to sell. And I know that what I heard was not pickups, not people who pre-ordered, but people who bought a cookbook on Sunday. We sold over 60 cookbooks.
That's great.
And so there was just this hub of activity, of things going on all Sunday long. There was like a buzz in the building.
Yeah.
And I love having some excitement and some things going on, and that's just a lot of fun. So yeah, I mean, it was just a busy morning.
It was a busy day. Yeah.
and
fun.
and then don't forget that we are in the week of Thanksgiving.
That seems like it just snuck up super fast.
Yeah.
That this is the week. Like, here we go.
Yeah, well, I didn't realize that Thanksgiving happens, 6 weeks after Easter. So, because that's what it feels like. And we just celebrated Easter.
Yeah,
and
right?
did a little summer thing, and then all of a sudden, whoa, here
Yeah,
it is.
yeah.
Trunk or treat, and a week later it's Thanksgiving. That's what it feels like, right?
Yeah.
And
Just about it.
And so, as it relates to that, two things. One is we'll be online tomorrow at 6 o'clock for Thanksgiving Eve worship, because we worship on the night before Thanksgiving. And then on Thursday, we will come to you, and we'll have a broadcast on Thanksgiving Day for you.
Yeah.
But I think we're
just,
going to do it a little bit earlier, so it'll be available most of the day. I think we're going to go live at noon on Thanksgiving Day, so that folks have, maybe you have nothing going on and you're waiting for something to happen, or maybe you got a lot going on and you want to catch it later. But we have always been able to have something on every Tuesday or Thursday when it falls on a holiday. We've been able to do something. So why break the streak now, right?
I love it. I love it.
So
yeah.
we'll come to you on Thursday. So we got something today right now. You got Wednesday at 6. You got Thursday. You got something, and then we'll roll into the weekend. So just great stuff. And
That's great stuff. And I just, it is a wonderful time of year.
It
and it's
is.
important to just, as fast as it's going, at least for us, and no matter how it's going in your life, to just pause, be grateful,
yeah, without a
give
doubt.
thanks.
Yep.
I think it's important in this season and all seasons.
Yep. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to say, well, I don't have anything big to be thankful for. I've said this time and time again. It's the small things
Yeah.
that are the important things. And that's what we need to take stock of the small things. And, let's go back 4 years ago. 4 years ago, I had started on Reformation, was here for 2 more Sundays, and then I went back to California because my wife had cancer surgery.
Yeah, this was right in the mix of all this season, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Wow.
And then I was in Sausalito. Well, we rented, but we were in our home in Sausalito in the national park. I was helping my wife gain her strength and recover. And my first time back after Rachel's surgery is I flew in on Wednesday so I could be at church for
You were flying back and forth.
for Thanksgiving Eve. We did Thanksgiving Eve worship.
Did you fly back that next morning?
That next morning, I flew back to San Francisco. There's a great bus line that goes from the airport to Marin County, and so you get on the shuttle and got back to our home in Sausalito where Rachel was, and my mother-in-law, who was also helping out, and our youngest Max came into town, and then I cooked Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah.
And then on that Saturday, because it was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, flew back here so I'd be ready for the weekend.
That's right.
That was the weekend. I don't know if you remember this. This was the weekend that when I flew back, my wife had sent with me some protein powder to make smoothies. This vanilla protein powder, and I put it in my suitcase.
Right.
Not in my like bring it on the plane, but in my checked
Right.
luggage. and they pulled my luggage. You remember this? They pulled my luggage.
Oh, I forgot all about
and
it,
they
though.
basically
Yeah.
said, well, it didn't make it on the plane. And I'm like, it wasn't a full plane, and the trip is less than an hour. How could it not make it on the plane? I'm like, it's got to be the protein powder.
Yep.
So I had to go back to the airport, on Sunday afternoon after church, when finally my bag had arrived with my protein powder. But I'm pretty sure they sent that through all sorts of X-rays and all that. And I thought, well, if I check it, then no problem. I was wrong. They never said that was a thing, but I guarantee you that's exactly what it was.
They were concerned about your protein powder.
Yeah, they were worried about that.
Yep.
So, so when I think about Thanksgivings, that one jumps out to me in recent past,
Yep.
right?
Okay.
So this past weekend, we were talking about surrendering our future, and I brought the old finger
Yes.
trap, and how the more you pull on it, when your fingers are in it, the weave tightens, and you can't escape.
And sometimes the more anxious you get, feeling like you'll never get out, and you eventually just,
Yep. And so
Destroy it.
today I had given the one that I was using on Sunday to Robbie's daughter Allie, and when Allie got it, she put her fingers in it, and she had the exact same. How do I get out of this thing? How do I get out? And I said, "Aha, there it is." That's what all of our first reaction is using that, and the more we try to control or exert our will in a situation, the more anxiety and struggle there is.
Yep.
But if you push in on it, the weave expands where you can let your fingers out. And it's a reminder that we can surrender ourselves to a situation, and it will turn out a lot better than when we fight or try to exert our will. And that's what we've been talking about over the last 3 weeks. And we talked about surrendering troubles to priorities. And then finally, I ended up talking about how do we surrender our future. And part of that is to make a plan for the future, but let God let it kind of reveal itself of how that plan is executed. You can make all the plans in the present, and then there comes a point you say, okay, God, I've done my work. I surrender that to you. And sometimes things don't go according to your plan, but God will work in and through that. And and I think that's really the thing is, thy will be done.
Yeah, we can bring up the best we have to offer, but in the end, we have to trust that however it's falling into place,
Yeah.
God's going to be there.
God's going to be there, and God's going to work through that.
Yeah.
And so we have one more week of that. So this coming weekend, which is, the Thanksgiving weekend, but it is also Christ the King weekend because we have a church calendar, and the church calendar doesn't end in December. It ends at the end of November. And it's very symbolic in the sense that Christ the King Sunday is really a remembrance, not that we're going to celebrate it this way, but traditionally the remembrance is that at the end of time, Christ will return. I mean, we say that in our creeds, right? Like Christ will come again, that he will come back. And we believe that. We say it in our creeds. And yet, so we place kind of that remembrance at the end of the church year as if to remember that, yes, when all things come to an end, that's when Christ will return. Christ is our King. So it has a lot of symbolic imagery to it. And I think it's good because at least in our church services, we say that Christ will come again. And this Sunday is somewhat dedicated to that understanding that no matter what, God isn't going to leave us behind. So I'll try to tie that into how do we surrender our lives to that? That not just our troubles, not just our priorities, not just our future, but all of us. How do we give all of ourselves?
What do you need to really be giving ourselves to?
That's right.
As a whole.
That's exactly right. So that's what's coming up, and that's kind of a way we'll cap off that. And then the new church year, which begins the following weekend in December, is Advent.
Here we go.
Yeah, here we go. Right, onto that. Right, onto getting ready for Christmas, because Advent means coming or appearing. And so the advent or the appearing of God in our lives, and that culminates with us celebrating Christmas together. And, it's always kind of fascinating because in what we call something called the lectionary or the prescribed readings, which we hardly ever use here,
No, we generally follow the seasons.
we follow the seasons, not
but
the readings they tell us you have to use.
yes, correct. Right.
Many of those readings also point to Christ's return too. Many of the Advent readings are less about getting ready for Christmas, but getting ready for Christ's return.
Yes, they are.
And so you kind of culminate with Christ the King, but then the following few weeks isn't just about getting ready for Christmas, it's about getting ready for Christ's
It
return.
has that balance.
A double
right?
ring to
I mean,
it.
it's we've got to remember the story of Christ coming to this world, but
Yep.
not just thinking that was for back then.
No, that Christ is coming for us.
Yeah.
And we also see that in a present day through the promised Holy Spirit. So it's not just, he came back then, like he showed up back then, and one day he'll show up again, and in the meantime look busy. No, the reminder is God shows up in the form of the Holy Spirit in our hearts and our minds, and being open and receptive to hearing that still small voice urging us into mission and into places to carry out his work, as well as God whispering strength to us through that same Spirit. Yeah. So that's kind of the catch-up of where we're at, really, in the next 6 weeks.
Which is a lot, but that's
so
where we're at.
And wild that this year ends on New Year's Eve. Not the calendar always, fluctuates, but this year we end on a New Year's Eve, and because it's New Year's Eve, the 31st of December, that means there's a fifth Sunday, and so we end the year. The last activity of the church in 2023 is a fifth Sunday too.
Yep.
And then of course, we turn it around and begin again, because that's what we do.
I love it.
So Jason, are we good? So we have a song today, and it is a song that we heard at 8 and 9:30 this weekend. And a young man came and sang for us, and his name is Aiden. I forget his last name. What? Fafard.
Yes.
Aiden Fafard. And he sang in God Lives in Glass. He sang at our previous Fifth Sunday Cabaret.
Mm-hmm.
And Dennis Allen, our Palace administrator.
That's right.
He has a
Palace
new title now.
administrator.
Bible study last week. We were reading some things about some folks working in the palace, and one of them was the palace administrator.
Yeah.
So
We
Dennis,
realized we needed
a new title for
new
him.
title.
So our palace administrator knew this song and commended it to Bruce and the music team, and Aiden came to church this weekend at 8 and 9:30 and sang this beautiful song.
Yeah.
And so if you
It
saw it,
was
you'll
great.
like it
was
again.
great, yeah.
And if you haven't seen it, you will be blessed by it. So let's take a listen.
Standing in your ruins feels a lot like the end. So used to losing, you're afraid to try again. Right now all you see are ashes where there was a flame. Truth is that you're not forgotten, 'cause grace knows your name. God's not done with you, even with your broken heart and your wounds and your scars. God's not done with you, even when you're lost and it's hard and you're falling apart. God's not done with you. It's not over, it's only begun. So don't hide, don't run, 'cause God's not done with you. There's a light you don't notice until you're standing in the dark. And there's a strength that's growing inside your shattered heart. Oh, God's not done with you, even Even with your broken heart and your wounds and your scars, God's not done with you. Even when you're lost and it's hard and you're falling apart, God's not done with you. It's not over, it's only begun. So don't hide, don't run, 'cause God's not done with you. He's got a plan, this is part of it. He's gonna finish what he started. He's got a plan, this is part of it. He's gonna finish what he started. He's not done. No, God's not done writing your story. No, he's not done. God's not done with you. Even with your broken heart and your wounds and your scars, God's not done with you. Even when you're lost and it's hard and you're falling apart, God's not done with you. It's not over, it's only begun. So don't hide, don't run, 'cause God's not done with you. No, he's not done writing your story. No, he's not done. God's not done with you.
So God's not done with you yet. And just a great song. And I really am glad that that Dennis said we should really do this song.
It's a great one, yeah.
And Toreen Wells, who wrote the song, Christian artist, and he has written quite a few, popular Christian music songs on Christian radio. And so I'm familiar with him, and I'm drawing a blank on his big hit, but I'm familiar with the one who wrote the song.
Yeah.
And I think that there's
Out there in the Christian music.
Christian music industry, and I think that's the thing is there are times that we might want to give up. Heartbreak, big mistakes in our lives, things that just cause us to stop trying, stop caring. And we need to hear from a voice other than our own that God never gives up on us. That he is going to work through these things in our lives. And I didn't put it on our, I always make some notes of some Bible verses, but what I didn't put in here was Romans chapter 8, verses 28, that God can use all things for the good, for those who trust him. That and that's a paraphrase, but essentially in Romans chapter 8, God says God uses all things for the good to those who believe in him. In other words, God can even take bad moments of your life that he did not cause, but eventually use them for good.
Yeah, and those can be some of those moments where people who have gone through really traumatic or awful experiences, the way God wouldn't wish on any of us, but
No.
people have used that for me. Like when they've come up and they've talked about those experiences, or that's helped me through times in life.
That's absolutely right.
They use it as a gift.
Yep. And that's exactly the point is you can learn something about yourself, about your faith in a bad experience. And then you can pay it forward by helping those who might be on the edge of a circumstance like that, or might be going through it themselves, and you might be that person who says, I know it doesn't feel like it, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. And when I went through this, here's what I experienced. And that means God could use a bad experience in your life and use it for good in somebody else's. And I think that in the moment, though, not down the road, but in the moment, you just feel like it's over and nothing will be good again. It's true, nothing will be the same again, but I think there's opportunity for good. But in that moment, you can't see it because you're in a pretty dark place, whatever that thing is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to pause and to hear these words that God's not done with you in spite of the heartbreak and the hurt. God's not going to give up, even in the things that are self-inflicted. I mean, there's one thing where, bad happens to you and it comes kind of from the outside,
Yeah.
and you have no control. You're a victim of a circumstance. And there are some things that are self-inflicted, but it doesn't matter to God which one of those two. That God says, I'm just going to be there. And even in the darkest moments, that in some ways God sits quietly beside you. Because maybe you're not ready to move forward.
And that's where you're at. But
That's
God doesn't hurt God. I mean, it's just like God's going to still be there.
God's going to still be there. And time is not a concern for him. He holds all things in his hands, including eternity. He's got plenty of time.
Yeah.
And I know at times we can't see that. But that word of hope is God's not done. And really this line, I got to find it here. God's not done writing your story. And I've used that. I haven't heard this song until this weekend, but I've talked about that very thing with church family and friends to say there's something unfolding that isn't great. It's painful. And I've said to them, I said, don't write the story. You can't finish the story. You have to let it unfold. You have to let God write that story.
Yeah.
Because you see a trajectory on something, and then you just want to finish it. And when we're in that mindset, what we do is we paint the darkest, most negative
Yeah.
trajectory
Yeah.
on it. And I've said to people, like, the story's not written yet. Let God work through what's coming forward. And I'm not saying, that it's going to have this beautiful, perfect resolution, whatever this thing is. But I guarantee you, if you're open to it, God's going to show up in what's ahead.
Yeah.
And to be open to that.
Absolutely.
And so I love that, God's not done writing the story. And in that vein of God's not done with you, the title of the song, I have a couple of verses from Philippians and then one from the Psalms. But the first one, Philippians 1:6, and Paul's talking about how much the church of Philippi had helped Paul, St. Paul, Pastor Paul, on the road during his ministry. So he started the church there, and then after he left, they continued to kind of help him out wherever he was at. I mean, he had a really strong bond with these folks.
Okay. Yeah.
And when he writes them this letter, Philippians, New Testament, he's reflecting on all the help he's received and all the good they've done. And he says, being confident of this, all this good stuff you've done, that God, who began a good work in you, will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. God's not done with you yet.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
Absolutely.
it's really plain in Paul. It's like, God started something in you, and I've already seen the seeds of faith starting to grow. He said, but he's going to keep doing that until it is complete. So in other words, if we are willing and open, we are a work in progress all the way to the end. You're a work in progress. I'm a work in progress.
That's it.
We're constantly, we have the ability to constantly learn and grow if we're open to it. And I'm still learning all sorts of things. I mean, when I study the scriptures to prepare a message, a sermon, I'm learning again. I'm like, oh, this is great stuff. And, oh, look what this has to say. So I discover things or discover them in a new way.
Yes. Sometimes it's just that looking at
In
it
a new way, a
in
new time,
yep.
new context, and then being able to share that. And it's like, oh, yeah. as a pastor, I learn all the time of, more specifically, well, I'll never do it that way again.
Yeah.
But there are other things. It's like, oh, I've learned this. Now I'm going to refine it. So I think that in one's life, to understand that God started something in you. If you're a person of faith, if you believe in Jesus, He's already started working on you, and He's not going to stop until that day when we meet Him face to face. I just think that is the process of life, that we can be lifelong learners, for lack of a better thing. And I want to take advantage of every opportunity of learning how to manage, how to deal, how to respond, and grow in all of those things, not to perfection, but to faithfulness. Like, how do I do things that are faithful to what God has called me to in my life as a pastor, as a husband, as a father, all the different facets of who I am, right? And I believe that God is working on me. And here's the thing: we should want that.
Yeah, there's a bit of it's okay to strive and because God's a part of it.
Yeah, God help me grow. God help me learn. God help me be open to a situation to learn from it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is really the thing, because in a lot of ways we're like a plant, like a house plant or something outside. You're either growing, sprouting new leaves, and or you're retracting. Oh, the sun's too hot and it's too dry, right? And plants are, some are hardy, some are fickle, but you're either in a state of growth or you're in a state of decay in a lot of ways. And I always want to be on a path of growth, even if it's small things, so that I'm growing closer to Jesus each day too, right? But he's not done talking about this, St. Paul. If we jump to the 2nd chapter and even the 4th chapter, Paul continues to talk about these things.
Yeah. So in Philippians chapter 2, verse 13, it says, "For it is God who works in you to will and to act according to His good purpose."
So God's going to give you the urging or the urgency.
That Holy Spirit calling on your heart.
Calling on your heart to say, oh, I got to do something, or I want to do something. And that can be as simple as, oh, I wanted to pack a box for Operation Christmas Child.
Yes.
Or, oh, I think I'll check out Bible study once and see. That's God working on your heart to grow you, to expand you a little bit. And so I think that those opportunities are there. If you want them and you're open to it, God's going to nudge you.
Yep.
And then Paul states this about himself. Well, go ahead and read.
This is a couple chapters later, in chapter 4, verse 13. It says, "I can do all things through Him who gives me strength."
So he's like, look, I'm doing all these things, and I'm a pastor, I'm a missionary, I'm an evangelist, and he's like, but I just know that the only reason I can do these things is Jesus.
Right.
It ain't me, it's Jesus working in me.
Yeah.
God's not done with you yet. Right?
Amen.
Yeah. But then if we go all the way back to Psalm 23, which many of us know quite well, there's this one line that I've grown to appreciate over the last 10 years. And it's one that we may not focus in if you're going to oh, the Lord is my shepherd. See, God's watching over us and we're sheep. We might talk about that. Or God provides, still waters and green pastures. We might talk about, there, even when we're walking through the valley of the shadow of death, God's there with me. We focus in on those things. And one of the places that I think deserves more attention is this second half of verse 3 of Psalm 23. God guides me in paths of righteousness for His name's sake. I really like that.
Yeah.
David is expressing this understanding that God's going to put me in places where he needs me to be to grow for his name's sake. God's going to put me in places and situations and moments so that I might be able to grow my relationship, righteousness. God's going to put me in the right place at the right time, that if I'm open to it, God can work on me.
Yeah.
And I really like that verse, but it's one that often gets like, well, let's talk about the things that have more imagery with them, right?
Yeah.
That those are the ones that appeal to us in the 23rd Psalm. But I'm like, this one really says a lot about God. Like, no, I'm going to be walking with you, and I'm going to put you into situations that will A, grow you, and B, you will be in a place to share about me too. Paths of righteousness for his name's sake. It's not where do I want to go,
Right.
you know. And you think about that story in John, at the very end of the Gospel of John. It's that last resurrection encounter where Peter sees the resurrected Jesus from his fishing boat up in the Sea of Galilee.
Yes. And it takes him a moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he
Recognize.
jumps in.
When he does,
He jumps in, swims to shore, of course, leaving James and John holding the net with all the fish in it.
Yes.
It's still funny because
Yeah.
we know how impulsive Peter is by just reading the Gospels.
Yes.
It fits the character, his
Yes.
character
Leaving
type.
them with all the fishing nets and his clothes.
Yeah, and
up
his
there.
clothes. We forgot about that. But when you look at kind of the way that these disciples told the stories about Peter, that's how he was, which talks to the authenticity of the authorship of they knew how Peter was, right? And so they get to have breakfast, right? And they're sitting there, and I don't know if this is 19 or 20 in the Gospel of John, but somewhere in there. And that's when Jesus says, "Do you love me?" And Peter's like, "Well, we're good friends." And he's like, No, do you love me? He's like, "Yeah, we're good friends." And he's like, "Okay, take care of my people," and sheep, but people. And then finally, Jesus comes to his level. He's like, "Are we good friends?" He's like, "Lord, you know we're good friends." Like, Jesus meets him where he's at, right? And he says, once again, "Feed my sheep," or "Take care of my people." And then he says, one day you will go where you don't want to go, and you will be led where you don't want to be led. Talking about the indication that Peter's going to follow him until his death. He's kind of indicating that. And in some ways, this is that whole moment of, even then, God will put you in paths of righteousness for his name's sake.
Yeah.
And Peter, being very human, says, "Well, what about John?" And Jesus says, "Don't you worry about him. I got plans for him too, but don't you worry about him." You remember this?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but I think of paths of righteousness, that even there are moments in places we don't want to be, but God can grow us in those moments too. And to be open to that Spirit who will give us strength in the unpleasant places in our lives too.
Absolutely.
So anyways, we're really glad that you joined us today. Philip is getting ready for a show tonight, and so he's not with us, but he sends his regards and his love to all of you. So we're not going to play out today because we have nothing to play out to unless you've learned piano.
We're gonna just, I think, roll.
We're just
with
going to
the
let this
end
go,
credits.
right?
Yeah.
But anyways, don't forget, you can join us tomorrow night at 6 o'clock for Thanksgiving Eve worship, and then we'll have something for you on Thanksgiving. I'm thinking it's going to be a noon broadcast on Thanksgiving Day.
Right.
So we'll be in touch, right?
Sounds
All
like
right.
the plan.
Love you. Take care. God bless you, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right.